I never thought I'd find myself in a legal battle over my own backyard pool, especially since I don't even belong to a homeowners association. But that's exactly what happened last summer, and let me tell you, it was one wild ride. My name's Mike, and I've lived in my modest 3-bedroom ranch house on the outskirts of town for nearly 20 years now. It's a quiet neighborhood, mostly older folks who've been here even longer than I have. We're not part of any fancy planned community or anything like that, just a regular suburban street with normal houses and normal people. About 5 years ago, I decided to treat myself and install an in-ground pool in my backyard. Nothing too extravagant, just a nice 16 by 32 rectangle with a small deck around it. Perfect for cooling off on hot summer days or having a few friends over for a barbecue. I went through all the proper channels, got the permits, had it professionally installed, the whole 9 yards. It was a chunk of change, but well worth it in my opinion. Everything was great for the first few years. I enjoyed my pool in peace, occasionally inviting the neighbors over for a swim if I saw them out in their yards on a particularly sweltering day. Old Mrs. Johnson next door even learned to do water aerobics, which was pretty adorable to watch. But then last May, things started to get weird. It began when I noticed a couple of strangers poking around my backyard one afternoon. I was in the kitchen and happened to glance out the window to see 2 men in polo shirts walking the perimeter of my pool, clipboards in hand. Naturally, I went out to investigate. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I called as I stepped onto my back patio. They looked up, startled, as if they hadn't expected to encounter the actual homeowner. "Oh, hello sir," the taller of the two said, recovering quickly. "We're just doing a routine inspection for the Sunnyside Estates Homeowner Association. Nothing to worry about." I frowned, confused. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. I'm not part of any homeowner association." The shorter man consulted his clipboard. "This is 1472 Maple Street, correct?" "Yes, but..." "Then you are indeed part of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association, sir," he said curtly. "Now if you'll excuse us, we need to finish our inspection." I was dumbfounded. In nearly 2 decades of living here, I'd never once heard of this Sunnyside Estates Homeowner Association. Something fishy was definitely going on. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave my property," I said firmly. "I am not a member of any homeowner association, and you do not have permission to be here." The 2 men exchanged glances, then shrugged. "Very well," said the taller one, "but you'll be hearing from us soon. Good day, sir." As they walked away, I stood there scratching my head. What in the world was that all about? I soon found out. 3 days later, I received a certified letter in the mail from the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association. With a sense of trepidation, I opened it up and began to read. "Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that you have installed an in-ground swimming pool on your property without obtaining proper approval from the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association Architectural Review Committee. This is in direct violation of our CC&Rs. Furthermore, our recent inspection has determined that your pool does not meet several of our community standards regarding size, fencing, and safety features. As such, you are hereby ordered to remove the non-compliant pool within 30 days. Failure to do so will result in fines of $100 per day until the violation is remedied. Alternatively, you may bring your pool into compliance and open it for use by all Sunnyside Estates residents as a community amenity. In this case, the homeowner association will assume responsibility for ongoing maintenance and upkeep. Please contact us immediately to discuss how you plan to resolve this issue. Sincerely, Karen Wellington, President, Sunnyside Estates Homeowner Association. I had to read the letter 3 times before the sheer audacity of it sank in. These people, whoever they were trying to claim jurisdiction over my property and essentially steal my private pool. It was absolutely ludicrous. My first instinct was to call the police and report this as some kind of scam, but a quick Google search revealed that there was indeed a Sunnyside Estates development about a half-mile away from my neighborhood. They'd broken ground on it maybe 2 to 3 years ago, building a bunch of cookie-cutter McMansions on what used to be an old farm property. Still, that had nothing to do with me or my house. I'd never signed any homeowner association agreement, and my property was clearly outside their boundaries. This had to be some kind of mistake, or a very bold attempt at fraud. Either way, I wasn't about to take it lying down. I immediately sat down at my computer and fired off a response. "Dear Ms. Wellington, I am in receipt of your letter dated May 15th regarding my backyard swimming pool. I'm afraid there has been a grave error, as I am not now, nor have I ever been, a member of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association. My property at 1472 Maple Street predates your development by many years and is not subject to your CC&Rs or any other homeowner association regulations. The pool in question was legally installed with all proper permits from the city. You have no authority whatsoever over my property or how I choose to use it. Please be advised that any further attempts to assert control over my private property, including sending representatives onto my land without permission, will be considered trespassing and handled accordingly. I trust this resolves the matter. Have a nice day. Sincerely, Michael Thompson. I printed it out, made a copy for my records, and mailed it off the very next morning. There, I thought. That should be the end of that nonsense. Oh, how wrong I was. Less than a week later, I received another certified letter from the Homeowner Association. This one was much less polite. Dear Mr. Thompson, we are in receipt of your response dated May 16th. Your claim that you are not subject to the authority of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowner Association is noted but rejected. All properties within a 1-mile radius of Sunnyside Estates automatically fall under our expanded jurisdiction as of January 1st of this year. This was approved by a unanimous vote of Homeowner Association members and filed with the County Clerk's office. As such, you are indeed bound by our regulations whether you signed an explicit agreement or not. Your continued denial of this fact does not change the legal reality of the situation. You have 14 days from receipt of this letter to either remove your non-compliant pool or open it for community use as previously stated. Failure to comply will result in legal action. This is your final warning. Sincerely, Karen Wellington, President, Sunnyside Estates Homeowner Association. Now I was getting angry. These people were clearly delusional if they thought they could unilaterally claim authority over property they didn't own. It was time to fight fire with fire. I immediately called my buddy Steve, who happened to be a real estate attorney. After explaining the situation, he agreed to take on the case pro bono, mostly because he said it was so ridiculous it would be fun to litigate. Steve drafted up a cease and desist letter, forcefully reiterating that their claims were baseless and threatening countersuits for harassment if they persisted. We sent copies not only to the Homeowner Association Board, but also to the City Council and County Commissioner's office. We thought that would be the end of it. Surely once they realized we were serious and willing to go to court, they'd back down and admit their mistake. But Karen Wellington and her band of busybodies were more persistent than we gave them credit for. 2 days after the deadline in their last letter expired, I woke up to find a team of workers in my backyard, erecting a chain-link fence around my pool. I burst out of the house in my bathrobe, shouting at them to get off my property. Karen herself was there, supervising the operation with a smug look on her face. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said sweetly. "Since you failed to comply with our directives, we're taking matters into our own hands. Your pool is now officially a Sunnyside Estates community amenity." "Like hell it is," I yelled. "This is trespassing and vandalism. I'm calling the police right now." Karen just smiled. "Go right ahead. We have all the proper documentation. You'll find the law is on our side." I ran back inside and dialed cop, my hands shaking with rage. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of bizarre dream. But it was all too real, and little did I know, this was only the beginning of a legal battle that would consume the next 3 months of my life. The police arrived about 15 minutes later, lights flashing but sirens off. By that time, I had thrown on some clothes and was standing in my driveway, arms crossed, glaring at Karen and her crew. 2 officers approached, looking confused by the scene before them. "What seems to be the problem here?" the older of the 2 asked. I launched into an explanation, my words tumbling out in an angry rush. "These people are trespassing on my property and vandalizing my pool. They claim to be from some homeowner association I don't even belong to, and they're trying to steal my backyard." Karen stepped forward, all poise and confidence. "Officers, I can assure you everything here is perfectly legal. We have documentation showing that this property falls under our homeowner association jurisdiction. Mr. Thompson here has been in violation of our bylaws, and we're simply taking the necessary steps to bring his pool into compliance." She handed them a folder full of official-looking papers. The officers leafed through them, frowning. "Ma'am," the younger cop said slowly, "I'm not sure these documents say what you think they do. This looks like an internal homeowner association vote, not a legally binding expansion of your authority." Karen's smile faltered slightly. "Well, I'm sure there's just been some misunderstanding. Our lawyers assured us this was all above board." The older officer turned to me. "Sir, do you have any documentation showing your property ownership and the permits for this pool?" "Of course," I said. "Let me go grab them." I ran inside and returned with a folder of my own, containing my deed, property tax records, and all the paperwork from when the pool was installed. The officers examined these as well. After a few minutes of quiet discussion between themselves, the older cop addressed us both. "Here's how this is going to go," he said firmly. "Ms. Wellington, You and your crew need to leave this property immediately. You have no legal right to be here or to alter Mr. Thompson's pool in any way. If you don't leave now, you'll be arrested for trespassing. Is that clear?" Karen's face turned an interesting shade of purple, but she nodded stiffly. "As for you, Mr. Thompson," the officer continued, "I'd strongly advise you to contact a lawyer. While it seems clear to us that your property is not part of this homeowner association, they obviously believe otherwise. You'll want to get this sorted out legally to prevent any further incidents." I nodded. "Already on it, officer. Thank you." As Karen and her minions packed up their fencing supplies and skulked away, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering anger. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, but at least I'd won this round. The next few weeks were a flurry of legal activity. Steve and I filed for an emergency injunction to prevent the homeowner association from taking any further action against my property. We also initiated a lawsuit for harassment, trespassing, and attempted conversion of property. The homeowner association, predictably, countersued. They claimed I was in violation of their regulations and owed thousands in fines and late fees. They even tried to argue that by not explicitly opting out of their expanded jurisdiction, I had tacitly agreed to join their association. It was complete nonsense, of course, but Karen and her crew seemed determined to drag this out as long as possible, perhaps hoping I'd get tired of fighting and just give in. Fat chance of that happening. I was prepared to take this all the way to the Supreme Court if I had to. As the legal battle raged on, things in the neighborhood got tense. Most of my immediate neighbors were supportive, equally appalled by the homeowner association's overreach. But the Sunnyside Estates residents were another story. I started noticing cars driving by my house slowly, occupants glaring at me as if I was some kind of criminal. There were whispers and pointed fingers when I went to the local grocery store. Someone even left a nasty note on my windshield, calling me a selfish pool homeowner association herder. It was surreal. Here I was, just trying to defend my private property rights, and suddenly I was being treated like a pariah. The worst incident came about a month into the dispute. I woke up one Saturday morning to find my front yard covered in plastic pink flamingos, easily 100 of them. A giant banner was strung between two trees, reading, "Share your pool, Scrooge." I was livid. This was vandalism, pure and simple. I called the police again, and they took a report, but without any witnesses or camera footage, there wasn't much they could do. As I was angrily pulling flamingos out of my lawn, my neighbor Ted came over to help. "This is getting out of hand, Mike," he said, shaking his head. "What are you going to do?" I sighed, tossing another pink monstrosity into a trash bag. "I don't know, Ted. I can't back down. This is my home, my property. If I give in now, what's to stop them from making more demands later?" Ted nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. And hey, you know we've all got your back, right? This affects all of us. If they can bully you into submission, none of our properties are safe." His words gave me a spark of inspiration. "You know what, Ted? I think it's time we stopped playing defense. Let's see how the folks at Sunnyside Estates like getting a taste of their own medicine." Over the next few days, I went door to door in my neighborhood, explaining the situation to anyone who hadn't heard and rallying support. Nearly everyone was on board with my plan. We formed our own neighborhood association. Let's call it the Maple Street Community Alliance. It wasn't a homeowner association with any real power, just a voluntary group of neighbors looking out for each other's interests. Our first order of business? We took a page out of Karen's book and drafted up some official-looking documents of our own. These stated that due to our historical presence in the area, all newer developments within a 2-mile radius, which conveniently included all of Sunnyside Estates, were subject to our community standards. And what were those standards, you ask? Well, we had fun with that part. Some highlights included: all homes must have at least one garishly painted garden gnome visible from the street at all times. Christmas decorations must remain up year-round. Lawns may only be mowed between the hours of 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. on Tuesdays. All vehicles parked in driveways must be covered with polka dot car covers. Residents must wear silly hats when checking their mail. We made sure to include language about hefty fines for non-compliance, just as the Sunnyside Home Owner Association had done to me. Was it childish? Perhaps? Legal? Absolutely not. But we figured it would make a point about how ridiculous their claims of authority over us were. We mailed copies of our bylaws to every home in Sunnyside Estates, as well as to their homeowner association board. Then we sat back and waited for the fireworks. The response was almost immediate. Karen Wellington herself showed up on my doorstep the very next day, her face red with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, waving the papers in my face. "You can't just declare authority over our neighborhood." I put on my best innocent expression. "Why not? That's exactly what you did to us. I'm simply following the precedent you set. This is different, she sputtered. We're an established homeowner association with legal standing. I shrugged. And we're an established neighborhood that predates your development. Seems to me we have more right to make rules for the area than you do. This is absurd, Karen said. None of our residents are going to follow these ridiculous rules. Oh, I raised an eyebrow. But I thought you believed in the importance of community standards and strict compliance with regulations. Isn't that why you've been harassing me about my pool? Karen's mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. Finally, she turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering something about calling her lawyer. I couldn't help but smile. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt like we might actually have the upper hand. Of course, we had no intention of actually enforcing our silly rules. The whole thing was just to prove a point. But over the next few days, we started noticing some interesting changes in Sunnyside Estates. A few of the residents, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Garden gnomes began appearing on lawns. I spotted at least one person wearing a sombrero to check their mail, and someone even covered their BMW with a polka dot sheet. It was clear that not everyone in the development was happy with their homeowner association's aggressive tactics. Our little stunt had exposed a rift in their community, and it was starting to widen. But Karen and her core group of homeowner association zealots weren't going to give up that easily. If anything, our countermove only made them more determined to assert their authority. The legal battle continued to drag on, with motions and counter-motions flying back and forth. Our lawyers were confident we had the stronger case, but the homeowner association seemed determined to overwhelm us with paperwork and legal fees. As spring turned to summer, I found myself unable to even enjoy my pool, the very thing this whole fight was about. Every time I thought about taking a swim, I imagined Karen and her cronies watching from behind binoculars, taking notes on my unauthorized pool usage. It was starting to take a toll on my mental health. I was stressed, irritable, and losing sleep. More than once, I caught myself wondering if it might be easier to just give in and let them have the damn pool. But every time those thoughts crept in, I reminded myself what was really at stake here. This wasn't just about a pool anymore. It was about the right to live peacefully in my own home without interference from power-hungry busybodies. It was about standing up to bullies who thought they could steamroll over people's rights. And so, I persevered. Little did I know, the turning point in our battle was just around the corner. As July approached, the tension in the neighborhood reached a fever pitch. The Sunnyside Estates Homeowner Association had ramped up their pressure tactics, sending daily letters threatening legal action not just against me, but against any of my neighbors who supported me. They even tried to pressure local businesses to deny services to residents of our non-compliant neighborhood. It was clear that Karen Wellington and her board had lost all sense of proportion. This wasn't about community standards anymore. It was a crusade, and they were determined to win at any cost. But their increasingly aggressive moves were starting to backfire. More and more Sunnyside residents were growing uncomfortable with the homeowner association's tactics. We started hearing whispers of dissent, of people questioning whether this fight was really worth it. The tide began to turn one hot Saturday afternoon in early July. I was out front, half-heartedly trying to keep my lawn alive in the summer heat, when I noticed a small group of people walking up my street. As they got closer, I realized with a start that I recognized them. They were from Sunnyside Estates. My first instinct was to brace for confrontation. Were they here to cause trouble? Stage some kind of protest? I set down my hose and waited warily as they approached. To my surprise, the man in the lead gave a friendly wave as they reached my property line. Mr. Thompson, I'm Dave Simmons, this is my wife Carol, and our neighbors the Patels and the Rodriguezes. We're from Sunnyside Estates, and, well, we'd like to talk, if you're willing. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Sure, come on in. Would you all like some lemonade? It's pretty hot out here. 10 minutes later, we were all seated in my living room, sipping cold drinks. The atmosphere was a bit awkward at first, but Dave quickly got to the point. Mr. Thompson, we wanted to come talk to you directly, neighbor to neighbor, he said. This whole situation with the homeowner association, it's gotten out of hand. A lot of us in Sunnyside, we didn't sign up for this kind of aggressive bullying. Carol nodded in agreement. We bought our homes there because we liked the neighborhood, not because we wanted to be part of some kind of paramilitary homeowner association force. What they're doing to you and your neighbors, it's just not right. I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. I appreciate you saying that. Believe me, I never wanted this fight. I just want to be left alone to enjoy my home in peace. Mr. Patel, a distinguished-looking older gentleman, spoke up next. We understand, and many of us feel the same way. The problem is, Karen Wellington and her inner circle have too much power. They've been making decisions without properly consulting the rest of the homeowners, and anyone who speaks up gets shouted down. But that's going to change, Mrs. Rodriguez added with a determined glint in her eye. We've been organizing. The next homeowner association meeting is in 2 weeks, and we're going to call for a vote to recall the entire board. I leaned forward, intrigued. You think you have the votes to do that? Dave nodded. We're pretty sure we do. This pool crusade of theirs was the last straw for a lot of people. But we could use your help. My help? I asked, surprised. What can I do? We'd like you to come speak at the meeting, Carol explained. Tell your side of the story. Help people understand what it's been like to be on the receiving end of all this. I think hearing directly from you could sway any fence-sitters. I mulled it over for a moment. It was a risky move, showing up in the lion's den, so to speak. But if it could help end this nightmare once and for all. All right, I said finally. I'll do it. But I have one condition. Name it, Dave said. If you succeed in recalling the board, I want a signed agreement stating that your homeowner association has no jurisdiction over my property or any homes outside the original Sunnyside Estates boundaries. No exceptions, no loopholes. The group exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. That's more than fair, Dave said. If we win this vote, you'll have your agreement. You have my word. As they left a while later, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I dared to hope that this ordeal might actually be nearing its end. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. I worked with Steve to prepare my statement for the homeowner association meeting, carefully crafting a message that would appeal to reason and community spirit rather than coming across as antagonistic. Meanwhile, Dave and his group were working tirelessly within Sunnyside Estates, rallying support for the recall vote. The night of the meeting arrived all too quickly. As I drove into Sunnyside Estates, my palms were sweating on the steering wheel. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. After all, I was walking into a room full of people who'd been told for months that I was the enemy. The meeting was being held in the community clubhouse, a building that under other circumstances I might have found quite nice. As I walked in, I could feel all eyes turned to me. The room was packed, with people lining the walls and spilling out into the hallway. Karen Wellington was at the front of the room, her face turning an interesting shade of red as she saw me enter. Mr. Thompson, this meeting is for Sunnyside Estates residents only. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave. But before I could respond, Dave stood up. Actually, Karen, Mr. Thompson is here at my invitation, as is his right under our bylaws. Article 7, Section 3 clearly states that homeowners may invite relevant speakers to address the association, subject to a simple majority approval of members present. He turned to the crowd. All in favor of allowing Mr. Thompson to speak, please raise your hands. I held my breath as hands went up across the room. It wasn't unanimous, but it was definitely a clear majority. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, but she knew she was beaten on this point. Very well, she said tersely. Mr. Thompson may speak, but I must insist we stick to the agreed-upon agenda. We have important business to discuss regarding the expansion of our community garden project. Dave stood up again. Actually, Madam President, I move to amend the agenda. I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current board, to be followed by a recall election if the motion passes. The room erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Karen banged her gavel frantically, trying to restore order. This is outrageous. You can't just... But she was cut off by the homeowner association's own parliamentarian, a retired judge who looked like he was enjoying this more than he should. I'm afraid the motion is in order, Madam President. According to our charter, any member in good standing can call for a no-confidence vote at any properly convened meeting. The motion must be seconded and then goes to an immediate vote. I second the motion, Carol called out firmly. Karen looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape route. Finding none, she took a deep breath and forced a smile. Very well. We will have a vote on this irregular motion. All those in favor of a vote of no confidence in the current board, please raise your hands. What followed was the longest 30 seconds of my life. Hands went up across the room. Not everyone, but a significant majority. The parliamentarian did a quick count, then nodded to Karen. The motion carries, he announced. We will now proceed to a formal recall vote for each board member, starting with the president. The next hour was a blur of voting and vote counting. One by one, Karen and her allies on the board were voted out. By the time it was over, the entire leadership of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowner Association had been removed from power. As the dust settled, Dave stood up once more. I move that we allow Mr. Thompson to address the association, as originally planned. Given the events of tonight, I believe his perspective is more relevant than ever. This time, the vote to let me speak was nearly unanimous. As I made my way to the front of the room, I could see Karen and her former board members huddled in a corner, looking shell-shocked. I cleared my throat and began to speak. Good evening, everyone. I know many of you may see me as an adversary, but the truth is, I'm just a homeowner like you. All I've ever wanted is to live peacefully in my home, enjoy my property, and be a good neighbor. For the next 15 minutes, I told my story. I explained how it felt to suddenly be told my property wasn't my own, to be threatened and harassed over a pool I'd legally installed years before their development even existed. I talked about the stress, the sleepless nights, the feeling of being under siege in my own home. But I also emphasized that I didn't blame the residents of Sunnyside Estates. I acknowledged that they too had been victims of an overzealous board that had lost sight of what really mattered: community, neighborliness, and respect for each other's rights. As I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then, to my amazement, people began to applaud. It started slowly, but built until nearly the entire room was clapping. An older woman I didn't know stood up, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Thompson, on behalf of Sunnyside Estates, I want to apologize for what you've been through. This is not who we are, not who we want to be as a community. I hope you can forgive us." I was touched by her sincerity. "There's nothing to forgive," I said. "Let's just move forward as neighbors, with respect for each other's rights and property." Dave took over then, outlining plans for a new, more limited homeowner association charter that would focus on community building rather than restrictive rules. And true to his word, one of the first items they voted on was a clear statement that the homeowner association's authority ended at the original boundaries of Sunnyside Estates. As the meeting wrapped up, people came up to shake my hand, apologize, or just introduce themselves. The atmosphere had completely transformed from hostile to welcoming. I left that night feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The legal issues would still take some time to fully resolve, but the threat was over. I could finally relax and enjoy my home, and my pool, in peace. The aftermath of that night brought some surprising changes to our little corner of the world. With the hardline homeowner association board gone, Sunnyside Estates and my own neighborhood began to form real connections. We started having joint block parties, community picnics, even a neighborhood watch program that covered both areas. Karen Wellington and her core group of supporters mostly kept to themselves after the recall, though I did spot her peeking over her fence one day as I was enjoying a swim. I considered inviting her over, after all. Wasn't that what started this whole mess? But in the end, I decided some fences were better left as they were. As for me, well, I learned a lot through this ordeal. I learned about the importance of standing up for your rights, even when it's difficult. I learned that sometimes, the best way to fight absurdity is with a little absurdity of your own. But most importantly, I learned that when neighbors come together and communicate openly, there's no problem too big to solve. Oh, and I finally got around to hosting that pool party I'd been planning before this all started. Let me tell you, that was the sweetest swim I've ever had. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.